Granzow. He has been on the ground in Israel, part of the ritualistic burning with the red heifers that are out there, and also the rebuilding of the temple. Fun fact: the night that Iran launched the drones, he called our co-owner Mark, and he was over at my house. So it was crazy. Just really glad that you're back home safe, even though I know that you're probably going back to Israel soon. So,
Yep.
yeah. So with that, I mean, we're going to get into it today, kind of talk about what's going on out there. It's been all over the news, and Chris's role, and just sort of the whole scope of what's happening in Israel right now. Just real quick, I want to caveat up front, there's a lot of confidential stuff out there. So, Chris, if I ask a question that maybe you can't answer, just let us know. I know that we have to be careful with, the security concerns and also media concerns and confidentiality of the people involved and everything else. So, but with all that said, we really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no, really, thanks for having me, Jared. And like I said, been a big supporter of you guys with Disciple ever since the creation of what you guys started there. So really, really respect and honor. Even yeah, got a nice new Disciple hat on. So yeah, just excited to be here with you today.
Awesome. Well, with that, how about you just tell us about yourself, right? Background, and then maybe after that, go into what's your involvement with all this.
No, definitely. Long background. I've actually been a friend of Mark Sturry's for many years. We actually have partnered together on several mission-related activities. I actually helped him with the startup of his hospital in Zambia and some different things over there in Zambia. So really, really respect the heart there behind both Mark and yourself and Disciple. I am the chairman of the Christian Agency for Israel, which focuses on Aliyah, which is the Jewish immigration back to Israel, which is prophesied all throughout the Bible. We also focus on humanitarian aid and education, focusing on helping Christians understand their biblical role in Israel and what God's currently doing there. And so that definitely came into play with what my last trip here. I just got back a day or so ago from Israel, and part of that is helping the Christian world at large understand what actually is happening and how to come in agreement and in cooperation with the Jewish leaders of faith, and actually understand that God's got some pretty amazing things going on, and is bringing all the pieces and parts together for His glory.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. It's funny on the ground, back here, just in Charlotte, I have all types of guys and Bible studies that go to our church that are talking about this. Other people are like, wait, what's going on out there? And they're having to explain it. And it's like, oftentimes I think Christians kind of think of this as like more of a Jewish thing, of rebuilding the temple and stuff like that. And I think that that's a great place to start. So, what's kind of the role of Christians in the rebuilding of the temple versus the Jews? Like, what's the different perspectives?
Honestly, there's a lot of Christians that I would say that don't have any concept or understanding about really even the significance of the temple, or what the original was, the tabernacle, and how that relates to their faith. So, one, I would say that's a great place to start if you are a Christian, wanted to learn more. I mean, just start right there in Genesis with Moses, when God gave Moses the plans to build the tabernacle and what the purpose of that was, which was in the redemption of sins, which we know was then fulfilled through Yeshua, Jesus Christ. Um, but it's always been about how God communicates and interacts with His people, and so that being said, the Jewish faith still believes that that is the proper way to communicate and atone for sins. They don't believe that their Messiah has come back yet. They believe the Messiah is coming, and so that is a necessary step for that to happen. So That being said, though, there are many, many prophetic scriptures there that actually talk about how the wealth of the nations and the really the Gentiles, which are our modern day Christians, will be playing a major role in the rebuilding of the temple and what that looks like. So, there is a role that Christians are to play in this. And like I said, it's really up to them to start to understand that and take on that mantle.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what is kind of like the relationship between, because obviously Jews are looking at one way and Christians are looking at another way. Like what's sort of the partnership like between the two?
Well, I think it's a very good partnership. I've seen many, many beautiful relationships between
Mhm,
Jewish and Christian organizations and
mhm.
just Jews and Christians in general. As we're getting closer and closer to what God's doing, it's there's obviously been a lot of hurt and pain from not just the last few generations, but for thousands of years, going back to the Crusades and everything, where there has been a big misunderstanding and a big conflict between both the Christians and Jews. But I've seen that even just in the last year soften, and really a lot of the Jewish fathers of faith, the rabbis and different Jewish leaders, really looking to Christians to say, "Hey, we see that you love us and you're supporting us, and that you want to help us in all of our endeavors, including what the future building of the third temple will be." And so really, I see amazing cooperation coming together on this. And there, like I said, there is a role. So a friend of mine, Byron Stinson, he is an amazing man of God, Christian man of God from Texas. Uh, he was actually the initial one who took the step of faith to say, "Hey, I want to help and start finding these pure red heifers because they started to pop up in herds around Texas." And so then he ended up partnering with one of the head rabbis in Israel. And again, as just a Christian from America, taking that step of faith to saying, "Hey, this is something that is prophetically will happen, is said that it will happen, and it's also something that the Jewish leaders are looking to have happen, but they can't do it on their own." And so, like I said, that's been a beautiful coming together of Christians and Jewish people of faith in starting to bring about things of God and things of Israel.
Yeah, wow. It's an incredible time to be alive, really. So I guess for people who maybe they don't know the history here, they don't understand why there needs to be this ritualistic burning of the red heifers, like maybe could you go over kind of the scope of exactly what the overall plan is here?
Yeah. Well, there's not a ton of information about it, but back when Moses was given the command by God to build the tabernacle, this happened when they had come out of Egypt. They were traveling in the wilderness. He went up on Mount Sinai, received the Ten Commandments. One of the biggest things was he actually wasn't just receiving the Ten Commandments, he actually received the plans to build the tabernacle, which again was a way that God could then uh, uh, commune and interact with his people and actually create a mechanism for the atonement of their sins. And the one of the very first step in that process was he said you need to take a pure red cow, and by that it's a cow that has only red hairs. It can't even have two white hairs touching. It's and even if one has one white hair, it's kind of on the edge of if it's okay. And then they actually have to burn that to complete ash. And it's also a very humane process. You humanely slaughter the cow. It has to be kosher, so it cannot. The cow can't feel any pain or anything like that. So it's all completely humane. The same way you would, if you were, slaughtering them for meat or for anything else. But that step is they have to be burnt to ash. You then take that ash, you mix it with the water of the Gihon spring and with the ancient cedars of Lebanon, wood particles, and together you have that mixture that then is used in the anointing of the high priest. And then you're able to actually generate priesthood out of that. And then it begins the process of, then you have the priesthood, and then you can start to build the temple. And so this goes all the way back to the time of Moses. There wasn't a lot of explanation given to why the red heifer. One of my personal theories was, when Moses was up on Mount Sinai and he came back down to the Israelites worshiping a golden cow, and it really infuriated both Moses and God, and so much he broke the tablets, and then he had to go back up and get the Ten Commandments and do all that. There was a lot of punishment from that as well. That one of my theories is it might have been God just saying, "Hey, you thought you could go to a cow for your problems and for your worship, but now you're going to start off this process by burning a cow to ashes to show that this isn't the way to do things. You got to do it the way I say it, the way God says it." But that's just a thought of mine. Again, there's just very little information there. But regardless, this is the process, and this is something that's happened all throughout history in the process of the temple. But this is a ritual that hasn't, we haven't seen this for thousands of years. So this is, another step in history of the Jewish people, and now also for the Christian people.
Wow. Yeah. Hey, Cam, do you want to ask a question here?
Yeah, we've got a beautiful segue actually. So Chris, Cam, sorry I'm late coming on the call. I really
Not a
appreciate
problem.
taking the time. With that in mind, one of the things that's so interesting, especially that we live in interesting times, is that in the Islamic faith as well, the Prophet Muhammad has a book of sayings, and in his book of sayings, he says that the sacrifice of the red heifer is approachment to the end times. So it's not in the Quran, it's in his book of sayings. So Islam also has a tangential role. We as Christians with the Judeo world value, supporting Israel is a very common theme that you see, especially in the Western church. And with what's going on currently with the state of Israel, which there is always a debate, is the current modern state of Israel the idea of the Israel of old, and what comes with that. But what would you say to a lot of people now that when I saw these news articles about the red heifer in Texas, it's this idea of the end times. There's the war taking place in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and this is the play to get the temple rebuilt. And, it's the great enemy of the West, America, or of the Islamic faith, America, is now supplying these cows that's taking place. So if we put it into context for now, there's a lot of concern taking place for all three of the major Abrahamic faiths. When you put this into context for the modernity, what do you see this as you kind of put all these elements together? And I'm sure you're getting a ton of questions because it just came out along with the war that's taking place. I mean, for modern day Christians that are trying to sort, is this a sign of the end times? Is it not a sign of the end times? Is this thing going back to a natural order? There's so many questions that come from, this is Old Testament, we're in modernity, there are so many factors at play. How are we supposed to approach this in modern times?
Yeah, no, obviously that's a great question, and obviously a legitimate concern for many out there. Um, One thing I can tell you, we could talk about the prophetic timeline all day long and get into theories and all kinds of questions. But one thing I like to tell people is we know for a fact we're somewhere in between Genesis and Revelations, and we're probably a lot closer to Revelations. And so that being said, I do know time is of the essence in our world. That's why I purposely am living as if time is short and God's got things that has to get done. That's why my personal prayer is, God, use me. It's the Jewish saying Hanani is, I am here. God, help. I'm here to help. I'm here to do whatever you need. But that being said, and this is why I'm actually even helping with this project. The temple itself is not a temple that is built on violence. It's not built on destruction. It's not built on hatred. It's something that's supposed to be uniting for all nations, for all people. It's supposed to be a place of worship for everybody. And that's even a lot of the Jewish leaders. They don't want to discriminate. They're saying, hey, this is a place of worship for everyone to interact with God. And so it's not supposed to be a point of conflict. It's supposed to be a point of unity and a point of peace. And so, the one thing I can tell you is that with all the people involved, everyone that I've met, at no point are they saying, "Hey, we want to see something horrific happen to the Arab world or to the Christian world or to the Jewish." That is not where this is coming from. This is coming from a place of, we want peace and we want respect for everyone involved, and we're not going to be able to build that temple until that can happen. And so, we're really believing that God is going to provide a way. I mean, He's got a plan. Again, you get into the prophetic, it spells out in quite detail about what will happen in the end days. And you go into the Tanakh, which is Isaiah, Micah, Ezekiel. There is, I mean, like I said, we could talk for hours and hours about the prophetic timeline, but I very much personally believe that we're in that. And I mean, obviously, you can see that as a sign of the times. But all to say that this isn't going to be something that's built upon on violence. This is going to be something that's built upon by peace. And I know currently, like I said, I was in Israel the other day when Iran and the others were coming against Israel, and obviously that wasn't a very peaceful act, but we did see God prevail and an actual miracle happen where 99% of everything that came in was blocked. No one got hurt, nothing got destroyed. I mean, it truly was I believe, an act of God that prevailed that night. And I think we're just at the beginning of seeing God's hand at work here to start to pave the way for peace. And like I said, it's not that everyone has to understand everything, but it's going to be where, with what we're doing, we want to actually open up that conversation. We want to say, hey, this is a conversation that we want to see all sides. We want you guys to see our perspective, and we want to see your perspective, and together we can find respect for each other in that. And then in doing so, we'll ultimately be able to get to the burning of the cows. We'll be able to get to the building of the temple, but because the nations will want, it actually says, that's one of the scriptures, it says the nations will be calling for the building of the temple. So until that happens, until we have all the nations saying, yes, let's bring out this temple, then it's not going to happen. So that's I hope that answered that a little bit.
Yeah, Chris,
No.
what's interesting, real quick, Cam,
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia actually partook in shooting down some of the drones coming from Iran, and I guess shout out to the Abraham Accords. But, there is an element of hope for the future for sure. But as Christians, we're told that, the time could be 5 minutes, it could be 500 years, right? So, it is pretty remarkable. Cam, did you want to have a follow-up to what you just said?
No, I thought that was great. It's one of those things that I really appreciate, because as a Disciple podcast, we always want to bring it back to, these are interesting topics, but our job is to take our daily bread and follow Jesus every day. Because I can sit with Chris and Jared and you guys and talk about this and say, well, it's over the Dome of the Rock, and there's no way this is going to get fixed, and this is going to be a mess, and there's going to be it's going to be horrific. But like you said, I think the perfect thing to remember in this is, it's interesting. We need to read the Tanakh. We need to understand as much as we can. And ultimately, though, it's following Christ as we go through this progression of what our time is going to look like, whether our time is the end time or not. And I guess, and maybe you've already answered this, but my follow-up question would be, from a logistical standpoint, as you're a member of this project, what does this look like for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? I mean, from the short term, what does this look like in a tangible, logistical way from right now?
Well, with what I can talk about, obviously the next step would be, in God's timing, actually doing the burning of the red heifer, which there
Okay.
are still logistical hurdles to come up, to overcome with that. There's also, again, this is also something of the nations is supposed to want this, and so we want to see a big involvement from the nations around the world, and leaders of the nations to come and be in support of this, or actually even partake in this. So again, there's logistics that need to happen. So, you know, I, when it's funny watching all these articles pop up where it's like, oh, the cows were secretly sacrificed in Jerusalem today, and I'm like just kind of laughing, like, oh well, the cows must have did that on their own. It's because again, this isn't going to be something of it's a secret and it's hidden and it's we're trying to secretly cause World War III in doing this. It's no, this is a God's timing, and when it's ready for this to take place, it will take place. Um, Obviously, we're doing our parts to make sure that we're ready for God's divine timing in this. But Obviously, that is the next step. Working with the Temple Institute in Israel, they have been preparing the priesthood for about 50 years. They've been raising up these young men who will eventually take on the priesthood, and they keep raising up new ones because eventually they age out of their requirement. But they do have the young men ready. And these also, just like the cows, these young men have to be pure and defect free. They have to be basically their entire lives they're raised in what's called upper rooms. So like the upper room from Yeshua in the Last Supper. That upper room, the reason it's called the upper room, because it's 9 arm lengths above the ground to ensure that anyone that's living in that upper room is not near death, which would be these young priests have never been around death. They weren't born in hospitals. They weren't born, they've been kept away so they could be pure. And then, like I said, ultimately when this ceremony takes place with the red heifers, it will then start off that course of events to anoint the priesthood. And so, that is ready, and then, like I said, there's a lot of other things that I'm hoping as time goes on, I can get into more details about other amazing things God's pulling together. But there, just know that God is very much in the works here and bringing the right people together in the right places and the right countries. And so, one thing I would encourage anyone who wants to get involved, wants to see what's going on, is one is get into your Bible, get into the prophets. One of my favorites, Isaiah. Isaiah is a great place to start. Isaiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah, Micah, Amos. Those are often a lot of overlooked books of the Bible for most people, but really something that this is where my heart's at in this. So, with the Christian Agency for Israel, we focused on Aliyah, which is the immigration of Jewish people back to Israel. But Aliyah actually means to ascend to the Temple Mount. It was actually part of the yearly ritual. Like right now, we're in Pesach, which is Passover. It would be a requirement of everyone in Israel to pilgrimage to Jerusalem and actually ascend or make Aliyah up to the Temple Mount and make their sacrifice. And in doing so, that's part of the rituals of the atonement of sin for the Jewish people. We're actually called, even as believers, to do that as well, to pilgrimage back to Jerusalem. That's why I was there just for at least the beginning of Pesach just a day ago. But in this Aliyah, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Aliyah is mentioned, or the future return of the Jewish people back to Israel is mentioned over 700 times in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. Something that one of my partners said to me a long time ago. He's like, if God says something one time, it's important. If he says something 700 times, you should probably pay attention. And so that really inspired me to take, not just a passive viewer role of saying, hey, I understand the Bible, I understand what God wants to do in this world, but I actually took that step of faith and said, hey, how can I help with Aliyah? And we actually went in and partnered with the Jewish Agency for Israel and actually helped build housing for these immigrants coming back. Right now it's a lot of Ukrainian immigrants, Russian immigrants, Ethiopian immigrants that are all Jewish that are making their return to Israel. But again, they are actually fulfilling prophecy in doing so. I encourage is that you can actually not only understand what God has said prophetically will happen, but you can actually take an active role in that, in fulfilling that. prophecy yourself as a Christian, and honestly, God has called the Christians to take up that role, to be the watchmen on the walls of Jerusalem, and actually come and partake in what God's doing in Israel.
That's incredible. Because I think one of the great things that I'm taking away from this, Chris, is, when you hear that there's a Levitical priesthood that is ready to be ordained, and you hear that there's a red heifer that is ready to be sacrificed, and at the same time, that there's a war going on, and you hear rumors of wars and earthquakes and things of that nature. As believers, we're told not to be afraid many times in the Bible, but I think for a lot of believers, this is an anxiety-producing thing. And it is helpful to hear from you to say, look, read your Bible and be at peace, and knowing that God is in control of this. This is something that is done in love, and that it is a sign of good things to come, and so a good prophecy compared to something to have anxiety about.
Yeah, actually, good little story from just the other day. I had spent the day before the attack on Israel from Iran the other day. I actually spent that day filming and producing other content we're working on in Israel, actually in the shepherd's fields, in where the Tower of the Flock is, Bethlehem Ephrata, with Byron Stinson, who brought over the red heifers. And I had Psalms 23 just bouncing around in my head all day, because I'm literally in the fields where David wrote the Psalms. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me, lay down in green pastures, and I'm in those pastures. But that night, as we got news that the attack was coming, I was right in downtown Jerusalem, and basically sitting on a balcony and watching from the direction I knew they were going to come from. And instead of being like frantic, I gotta get in the bunker and we gotta do this and this and this, we just kind of hung out and relaxed, because that same verse was still in my head, where I'm literally overlooking the actual valley of the shadow of death, which is right there in Jerusalem. I'm overlooking it, and then I go, and I will fear no evil, because I know God is with me. His rod and his staff, they're comforting me. And not only that, but he says, then I will prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies. So I'm like, it's one of those things where even among all this, God's got a feast in store for us. And so, that's what I say. And I've just heard everybody saying, like, during that attack, everybody had Psalms in their head. Everybody had that on their hearts, because I guess God it was one of those things where it's like, hey, no, this is a time to rejoice in God's providence and protection for his people, because his word is true, and he said, this is what I'm going to do. So being there and living that out and watching a real life miracle play out in front of you, again, while being involved in these amazing things that God is doing, it's just one of those things where, honestly, going through New York City on the way back yesterday, I felt more endangered with what I'm seeing happen at Columbia University and places. So it's God is definitely very much at work here, and that's where I encourage every Christian to just say, God, let your will be done. And what do you want me to do in this? Because there's a lot that needs to get done in a very short time, and if you're willing to take that step of faith and listen to what God wants you to do, he's gonna take you to places that you couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, for anybody listening that wants to have a New Testament precedent for this, I would just recommend they read Romans 11. I'm not going to
Yeah.
read the whole chapter, but
Yeah.
so I think we've kind of touched on this security concerns, and obviously, the concern is that, and this is kind of what the media is saying, is what Al Jazeera is saying, is that Israel plans on desecrating the Dome of the Rock, which is the third most sacred religious site for the Muslims, and that's going to start a holy war and all these different things. And
One thing I'd like to say about that, it may be the third most holy site for the Muslim world, but it's the number one most holy site for the Jewish world.
right,
And
exactly.
that's what they forget a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the horrible thing that happened, the slaughter that happened on October 7th, the Hamas leader actually talked about this specific. And again, he probably was looking at more from a propaganda standpoint to get other Islamic countries to join in, right? But are you? I know you talked about some of the security concerns, but what sort of it like on the ground? I know you said a lot of people, they know that they're doing God's will, so that's giving them peace about it. But I mean, are you hearing concerns in Israel from people that are involved in this? What's sort of your take on that?
Well, I mean, again, it's a lot of trust in God. It's a lot of leaning not on your own understanding. But I will say, and this is what I tell people all the time: is statistically speaking, Jerusalem is the safest city in the entire world. There's no attack like muggings or rapes or anything like that happen there. It's a very very safe city. You'll see middle school kids running around at midnight, going from house to house, and no one's bothering them, no one's abducting them, there's no gang violence. But every once in a while, one of the crazy neighbors does shoot some rockets over or something like that, and that's why it's getting this terrible reputation that it's a very dangerous place. And like I said, there's certain areas within Israel that can be dangerous, but you got to go through checkpoints to get there and things. So from a perspective of like if you were wanting to tour Israel, it's extremely safe. Like I said, I'm over there all the time. We've brought hundreds of tours over, and never had an issue with any single one of them. Even a tour, we had a big tour there on October 7th when that happened. We got everyone out perfectly safe and fine. But it's the one thing to keep in mind about Israel is that um, pretty much everybody is required to do military service. So,
Yeah.
there's a very interesting thing that happens in Israel. If say there's an emergency, like, if someone's having a heart attack or there is something going on, if that was happening in America, you usually have everyone running away from that situation. And then you maybe have one or two people running in, like a cop or a firefighter or something. In Israel, it's the opposite. When something happens, you have everybody rushing into that situation because everybody's trained, everyone knows how to deal with it. And they all have unique skills that they're bringing to that situation as a problem solving method. And but even then, being in Israel, I was hanging out with my friends over there, and they're either active or reserve duty, IDF. So they all have guns slung over their shoulders and rifles and things. So it's. I mean, you're not gonna go anywhere in Israel, especially right now, without every single person being alert to any potential threats or danger. And like I said, it's really when I was over there, honestly I feel safer over there than I do when I'm in Israel, or when I feel safer in Israel than I do when I'm in America, even given the current situation.
So if you like that video, you can watch another one right here. And if you want to see the full podcast, you can click right here. And as always, 25% of all proceeds go to missions, and you can always check us out, disciples.us.